Hi, everyone. Thank y'all for joining us for our Beef Brunch News Update on Tuesday, November 14th. I am going to go ahead and turn it on over to Vince for our update in Central and South Louisiana.
Thank you, Ashley, for having me today. As always, it's a great pleasure to present. And sooner or later, we're gonna have to get Brittany Zombrek on board to do this, or be a co-partner. So she asked me about it last week, and so we'll have to bring her on board here soon. But anyhow, we're getting some much needed rain in South and Central Louisiana. We woke up to that this morning, as per the forecast. So that's a very, very welcome. But by golly, I'm still getting calls for hay. Believe it or not, I just had a call right before we got on here. So there's still a great shortage of hay, and people have been feeding hay for, in some cases, 6 weeks now. And ryegrass and any winter pastures that have been planted, we're waiting on this rain we're getting today, and hopefully tomorrow through midday is what the forecast is calling for, to get it on up. But we're still 4 to 6 weeks out on grazing anything, so there's going to be quite a bit of hay consumed and moving forward. There's a lot of liquid feeders out right now. Other supplementations of, just depending on what's available to an area, some salt and meal and some 3-in-1 mixes. All the liquid feed guys are busy right now, and in some cases having a little trouble getting enough product soon enough because a lot of people are using it. As far as we're just waiting on winter pasture feeding hay. I talked to one of the Sailborn representatives this morning. He called me about advertising one of their stockers coming up in December, and he said it's been remarkable, the runs, and Lee has talked about this in the past, because he's closely affiliated with a couple of stockyards. And as of yesterday for the Kenna sale, as of close of books last night, before they started taking cattle this morning, they had 800 head of cattle in the barn yesterday afternoon. So they're looking at another big run before the holidays, because I think next week they're probably not going to have any sales for the most part. So it's very, very concerning moving forward, how our cow herd is going to look in Central and South Louisiana, because there's been an awful lot of cattle sold. So it's bull time of the year. We're hearing of a lot of bulls that are not having very good tests. We're on the heels of the test that goes on at Dominic Stockyard. Last week they did that, and I think the general consensus was they had some bulls that consistently tested lower. Ashley, if you would, you can chime in on that when you give your presentation. But that's kind of the consensus I got. There's a lot of very marginal bulls. There's some bull tests coming up. I would just, if you're going to invest in a new bull, make sure those tests are good, because those bulls went through the same heat scenarios that our age bulls went through this summer. So it's a value. It could be a very valuable lesson moving forward if you don't have those bulls retested before going out to breed a bunch of open cows. So that's kind of where we're at right now. I think for the most part, most calves, not a lot of people are stockering calves right now, where normally you would see a handful in our part of the country, holding some calves to graze on ryegrass. But we've been so dry and parched after that frost we had 2 weeks ago, and just the dry conditions ahead of the frost. I'm telling you, there's some pastures that look like desert out there for South and Central Louisiana, where normally this time of the year we're still fairly green and cows are out and picking. They're standing at the gate waiting for something right now. So it's going to be a very challenging time in the next 2 months here, up until probably January 15th. Hopefully we got something up and growing. And I kind of looked at my own personal fields. I ran home for lunch today, and I got some oats and ryegrass that's been planted for 3 weeks. I think I looked at the calendar earlier, and it's starting to germinate after yesterday's rain. Friday's rain and today's rain. So hopefully we see something green coming on in the next 2 to 3 days here. But that's the general consensus. We had a lot of fertilizer trucks running around on the weekend, and people that were hesitant to plant any kind of winter pastures were scrambling to get ryegrass out. And we had an awful lot of spreader carts running around the countryside this last 4 or 5 days. So hopefully that this rain changes everything and gives us a good outlook for for what's to come and when we get to winter, so to speak. So that's about all I have today.
Thank you. Yeah, I swung by Dominique's last week when Laney was hosting that BSE day, and I didn't get to stay very long because I was making a full circle of the state. But I did not ask her for a full summary, but I know there were a couple bulls by the time I was there that did not test well, and were not going to be used that year. And I mean, I think Vince, I think you pretty much said it well. The drought's got its impacts all across all aspects of production, and that definitely includes our bulls. And so even if you've been feeding them pretty well, the heat still could have impacted them. You'll have to think about that. I know I say it and said it before, but it takes 60 days to get a whole new wave of sperm to be produced. And so 2 months ago, it was still pretty hot. And so it's very possible that we're still seeing those long lasting effects of the heat and then the continued effects of the drought that we're still in. I was visiting with our herd manager here at the Dean Lee station this morning. We're short on grass like everybody else. We've been feeding hay like everybody else for a while. And I know a lot of times people think, well, you're the state, you've got the research stations, y'all got all the extras and you get to do it however you want and just go with it. But we don't. We have to be self-sufficient. We have to run ourselves. And so with that, not only are we having to run the herd, but we have to navigate around our research as well. And he was wanting to try to use some pastures, wanted to know if it was at all possible to use some pastures that we had designated for a research study for some other cows that were not on the project. Long story short is we couldn't use the pastures because even though they could be grazed right now, they can't be due to the research project. So it's tight here too, I guess is my point. It's tight everywhere. It's tight even on the stations. And so we get it, and hopefully somehow it gets better soon. I'm headed to Abilene this weekend, and I always get anxious anytime I drive further west towards home. For me is Central Texas, but anytime I head back west towards Texas at all, it usually looks worse, but right now I don't know that it will look worse. This is probably the first time that since I've been in Louisiana, that it's been as bad or worse in terms of drought compared to back home for me. So with all of that blabbering, Lee, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Well, thank you, Ashley and Vince. Glad to be with you all here today. Ashley, you made some great points. Vince, you did too. This has been a truly extraordinary year. Surely an extraordinary growing season, to say the least. And lack of rain has just capitalized everything, and so on and so forth. We're very grateful that our friends in Central and South Louisiana are picking up the rainfall. Kind of felt a little guilty talking to Vince the last few weeks because us up here on the northern side have been getting not regular rains, but a smattering of rain here and there. And the trend has continued since the last time we visited on one of these news updates. We've been continuing to receive some rain, depending on the location. Last week, uh, got some locations received over an inch, some almost 2 inches of rain last week, and it was very beneficial. The thing, and actually, a producer called my attention to it, and I looked on my own personal place, and he was right. We've yet to run any water. The rainfall has done a world of good, and it has sure benefited, especially those winter forages that have been planted. But we've yet to run any water through creeks or drainage ditches or anything like that to refill some of these water sources. So there's still some folks that are kind of struggling on the kettle watering side of things, though the cooler temperatures have definitely made an impact, and the rain has made an impact, but we had been able to refill some of the stock ponds and such that that a lot of producers up in North Louisiana rely on to water their cattle. Uh, hay continues to be in high demand. Still getting some calls on some hay. I would say that the volume of calls looking for hay have diminished quite a bit, and I think that's mainly due to folks have scrambled around and found maybe not enough hay, but enough to get started on for this feeding season, or they simply liquidated herds, or they knew what their capacity was as far as hay and how many cows they could carry through the winter on the hay supplies they had, and they culled down hard enough took a knife to enough of them to get down to a level that their hay supplies could support throughout the season. So anyway, we have seen a slight diminishment of requests for hay and everything. The winter forages look good, especially after the rains that we have been getting. Um, they were really beneficial, folks, and we've really seen the winter forages turn it on in the last 2 or 3 weeks, especially in northwest Louisiana. North Central has maybe received a little less rainfall, but they've been able to get enough to get those winter forages kicked off and everything. Moving right into the market reports, and to Vince's point about these large runs at these auction barns, I'm going to step out on a limb and say that things have maybe returned closer to historical normal in at North Louisiana auction barns. I'm not going to say that we're not still seeing a lot of cows sold, because I believe that's true. I think there's still a pretty good bit, but it's showing maybe some slight signs of tapering off, or maybe trying to return to normal. Folks, we have sold a lot of cows in northwest Louisiana, North Louisiana, North Central Louisiana. There have been a lot of cows shed in the last 3 months. And frankly, one of the sale barn operators told me, I don't know where all the cows are coming from. He told me, I don't know how we can have any cattle left out in the country. And frankly, amongst these sale barn operators, that's a big concern, is where are the cattle going to come from in the future, moving forward. If you'll remember right, the last time we did one of these news updates, I didn't have a market report. There was not enough data to truly put a market report together um, at that time. This week we do have enough data, and I'll jump right into it. As far as my confidence in the data, it's medium to medium high. We had quite a few observations there, and so I'll tell you, well, the way I see it and the way the numbers shake out. On 500 to 600 pound steers, uh, the average of the prices, the average low was $1.01 a pound. The average high was $2.37 per pound. 5 to 6 weight heifers, $1.24 to $2.15. On cull cows, 66 to $1.11. Cull bulls, 85 cents per pound to $1.17 per pound. Bred cows, average of highs, $1,693.75. Average range on pairs were $750 per pair, all the way up to $2,200 per pair. Now, due to the fact that we didn't have a market report last time, I can't track percentage changes in the markets. What I can tell, and that's not a bad thing, folks. I'll be honest with you, because if I did, it would show a pretty significant drop, folks. This this calf market, along with cull cows and cull bulls, has been um, has been greatly affected by this cattle on feed report that continues to dog us, so to speak. Um, it was a very bearish cattle on feed report released several weeks ago, and it still has implications for the cattle markets today. The futures market has seen several days of precipitous drops, though it seems like things are leveling out a little bit the last day or so. But folks, frankly, I talked to a contact I have, and within the industry, and he told me that the feedlots are at a fairly high rate of census. They've got a lot of cattle in the feedlots right now. You think back to the drought of the late summer and how many calves were sold and marketed early. Well, the lightweight cattle may have wound up on a grazing operation, or in a backgrounding facility, but those 5, 6 weights, 7 weights, if you were lucky enough to have any that big, that were sold in August or September, they chances are they may have found their way into a feedlot, and frankly, the feedlots have a lot of cattle in them right now, and naturally that's tamping down the need for replacement cattle. It, it's going to turn around. I feel like, folks. That's as far out on a limb as I'm willing to stand on market forecasting, but I do feel like that we'll see some maybe some slight price improvement. If you're holding cattle right now on and you don't have any ryegrass planted, or you just wean some cattle and you're on the fence, I would maybe try to hold them for a little bit before I market them. Let this market stabilize just a little bit. But the flip to that coin is the fact that the feed continues to be high, folks. It's a consistent problem, and especially on small operations, you can really get in the hole pretty fast on feed costs, and especially whenever you're not able to take advantage of truckloads of feed or mix your own ration at a time. You can really get in a hole on the feed costs and turn around and look and think, well, I would have been better off if I'd have sold the cattle after I weaned them pretty soon after weaning. So with that being said, we've had a couple of bull sales within the last month up this way. I was able to attend the Branch Ranch's bull sale back last week, and they had a very good bull sale. The bulls were fantastic, a really impressive set of bulls that they sold. Sold some commercial heifers that some had first calf on them, and really nice offering of cattle they had there. Kudos to our friends over there at the Branch Ranch. Also had the chance to visit with our friends over at Dixie Farms, Angus, Mr. Burford and his bunch, and they had a really good Angus bull sale here. It's been almost a month ago now, but really good bull sale. I've said in news updates before in past years that if you're in the market for bulls, folks, you don't have to drive all over the country looking for bulls. We have some really good purebred breeders that are raising some really good replacement bulls right here in the state of Louisiana. And all you have to do is ask. If you ever need help finding bulls, finding breeders, you just let us know. We'll be more than happy to point you in the direction that you need to go. With that being said, that's all I have, Ashley.
All right, thank you. I guess two things. So first, Vince mentioned getting Brittany on here. We've been saying that, and I'm ready for it. But I also need to welcome Trip Morgan to our group. He's not on here with us today, but it is his first day at the Ag Center. He's filling Jason Holmes' spot in the Northeast region. So Trip listens to this and has been listening to this. He worked at Louisiana Tech previously. So giving him a shout out on his, I guess it'll be his second day when this gets released, first day when we recorded on Monday. But we're excited to have both Brittany and Trip start joining us on these things coming up here before the end of the year. The other thing to mention, I'm going to try to share my screen really quick. Hopefully this will work. Really the only event that we have coming up shortly is going to be the Louisiana Forage Conference. So that is hosted by the Louisiana Forage and Grassland Council, as well as Louisiana Grazing Lands Conservation Initiative. I always get tongue-tied when I say that. But if you can see the screen, if you're watching this, or if you're just listening to it on podcast, I'll tell you, you can see that several of the topics or the presentations will focus on carbon management, carbon contracts, and working with carbon purchasing companies. They've been getting a lot of questions. These two groups have been getting a lot of questions about that. And so they have several speakers that are going to discuss that. Dr. Marcelo Vidavato here at Dean Lee Station. I mentioned him a few times before. He's our new nutritionist. He's going to talk about some of the studies that he's starting, as well as some that he has planned. We'll have updates from these respective groups, as well as NRCS, and then a few other topics as well. So in the video and podcast description, I'm going to put the date down. That's December 1st. That's a Friday. From 8:30 to 1:30, it will be in the mega shelter, the evacuation center here in Alexandria. You can register online, or you can pay at the door. It's $25. That does buy you lunch. And the registration link will be, again, in those descriptions there. So this is annual. They've been doing it. I mean, going on 4 years with the Ag Center for me, and I've been to it each year since I started. It's one of the first events that I went to as an agent. So hope to see y'all there. And I think that's really all of the main events I think that we have for producers coming up, unless I'm forgetting anything. Vince is shaking his head. So we're getting ready for the holidays. Next week is Thanksgiving. And so y'all will have Thanksgiving with your families before we see you again for another news update. So I want to wish everybody a happy Thanksgiving. I hope that you get to spend time with your family and get to relax. Hopefully we get a lot more rain over the next couple of weeks as well. And with that, we will see you again in just a couple of weeks.